You're tuning in to Geek Speak, a GeekInsider production. We're sitting with special guests in entertainment, news, and tech. So sit back and enjoy as we geek out together right now. Good evening, everybody. This is Meredith Lochran, and this is Geek Speak Comics Talk. Tonight we have a very special guest, and I am going to drop the card. I also wanted to make sure that I introduce my co-host, C. Michael Lanning. Let's drop the card here. Hello, Barbara.
Hi, everyone.
Well, you know what? Let me give you the big screen here, or the kind of big screen, so you can kind of introduce yourself.
All right. My name's Barb Kaaalberg, and I have been a comic book pro since 1989. An inker for most of that time. And when I hit 60, I decided it was time to push the envelope now, or it's never going to happen. So I started writing my own book, and I wrote and inked Divinity #1, which won the 2020 Best New Indie Series from Indie Comics Awards. And issue 2, I not only co-wrote, I should say, because R.A. Jones is scripting for me. I also inked it and colored it. That's another new talent I've taught myself in the last couple of years, is coloring. So I'm expanding my repertoire.
I love that, because for me personally, I'm 49. I'm very proud to say I'm 49. And last year is the first time that I got something published in comic books.
Oh yeah, you're never too old. I'm 62 now, and I'm still going strong, and I feel 20. So you're never too old.
But you know what? There's a part of me that is really, really glad that I waited this long to do that, because I've been writing my entire life, and I've been in publishing as far as newspapers and stuff like that. But when it came to the comic book process, because of the history, because there's so much involved as far as layouts and speaking to your artists and everybody else that you're collaborating with, had I been much younger, I don't know that I would have had the patience for that.
Patience is definitely something that you learn as you age, and you gain a lot of other wisdom too, especially on the inner workings of the industry and how things work, not only from an artistic perspective, but from a business perspective. And I brought that to Silverline. I spent about 20 years doing comics, while I was doing comics, also being a corporate accountant. So I brought the accounting side of it to Silverline, and I'm their CFO.
Mm-hmm. So now I'm kind of curious then, was comic books always on your radar?
No. No, though they weren't. Actually, I came in very late to the game. I used to read comics when I was growing up. I worked in a Rexall drugstore, and one of my jobs was to stock and remove the books from the spinner racks. And I was supposed to rip off the front covers of the unsold comics, and we sent the covers back, and they got pennies on the dollars. And then we were supposed to throw the interiors away in the garbage. Well, the garbage happened to be my trunk of my car. And so, yeah, I took all of these coverless comics home, and I would read them. But I got away from that in college then, and life happened, and I got married, and I had children. But I was always a painter. I always painted too. And somewhere along the way in the 80s, I went into a Walden bookstore, and I found this weird thing called a graphic novel, which I'd never heard of. And it was ElfQuest, and it just totally enchanted me. I was consumed with this. And it opened up an entirely new world for me. And I went to my very first ever convention. It was a science fiction convention. Met some other fans. Got into a fan group. And then the next year I came back, and one of the Peonies, Richard, was going to be there that year. And I'd been painting fan art, of ElfQuest in the previous year. And one of the girls in my fan group took one of those pieces and gave it to Richard. And during the convention, he offered me a job.
Oh, wow.
Yep. He offered me a job to paint their backdrop for their convention booth. And during the course of doing this job for them, I picked their brains. And I'm saying to myself, I've been painting most of my life. Why can't I take that paintbrush, dip it in ink, and ink a comic book?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So
that's a hard thing to do.
So in 1988, I took in a huge portfolio out to San Diego Comic-Con, my first comic book convention ever, and I picked SDCC, which was like jumping in the deep end. Why not just go for the big time?
Oh, yeah. You might as well. Hey,
yeah,
swim, right?
That's right. That's right. But the thing is, I took everything, including the kitchen sink, in this portfolio, which is exactly the wrong thing to do. I took everything back to sketches I'd done in high school, which is really embarrassing. And I heard about it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got shredded. But I also listened, and this is a big thing that a lot of artists don't get, is that they're going to get criticized. They're going to get raked over the coals. They're going to get absolutely shredded. But you got to put that aside. It's not personal.
Yeah.
Listen to what they're saying, I listen to all the criticisms, but I also listen to what I should be doing. And I went to all the seminars, and I went to a seminar by Dick Giordano, which was just simply amazing. And I took all that knowledge and I went back home and I practiced for a year. And I came back in 1989 and got a job with Malibu Comics, and the rest is history. So from there, I went to DC and Marvel, and now and Innovation and Dark Horse and Image. And
you've been through the whole gamut, huh?
Oh, I have. I've got something like 6,000 pages under my belt, I guess.
Ooh,
something like that.
Wow.
Well, Barbara, I'm kind of curious because you mentioned bringing your portfolio to the convention. How important is that for budding artists?
It's very important. I mean, an editor doesn't have a lot of time, okay? They want to see what they're looking for within 5 or 6 pages. So if you're going to cram 50 pages of your artwork in there, they don't have time for that. They'll toss it. They won't even bother to look at it. What you want to do is you want to pick out, in my case, as an inker, I wanted to pick out a penciled page and an inked page. If you're going to go for pencils, you just need the pencils. But I picked 5 or 6 penciled pages and the corresponding inks. And that was it. And I would pick a couple of flashy pages, splashes, but you always want to include interiors. I mean, you could do pinups from now till, Judgment Day, and they all look great. But what an editor is really looking for is how you handle sequential art. So a couple of flashy pages and then 4 or 5 sequential pages. And that's it. Show your best work. Don't show anything that you will look at the editor and say, well, this isn't my best piece. Don't ever say that. Show only your best pieces and make it 4 or 5, 6 at the most pages. That's all they want, because they don't have the time, the inclination, or the interest to go through a stack of stuff like this. So that's my best advice.
So now, kind of, I guess to follow up with that, I know in the publishing industry with pros, you don't want to go to an agent or an editor who specializes in horror and give them a romance.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think, when you're out there, and you want to bring your portfolio and things like that, and you're bringing it to people, don't just go to anybody's table. I would think. I'm sure that's the same with the artists.
If you're looking to get anything anywhere, you might want to have two different portfolios. One tailor made towards definite comic type books, superheroes, independent stuff like that. But if you're gonna show something that would be better off in a children's book, then have a separate portfolio for that. And in my case, my portfolio always contained, I only did one portfolio, but I always had one page from a children's book in it, which in my case, I had Rugrats, or not Rugrats, Angry Beavers from Nickelodeon. I did a little bit of animation for them, so I included one page from that.
Oh, I love that, so that they can see your range.
Right. Right. And that's another thing is if you've worked on a variety of pencilers, which I have over the years, like a lot, don't make all of your samples from the same penciler. Show them your range. Show them the image style and the older classic style or simplistic styles, and a noir style. You know, throw a little bit of everything in those 5 or 6 pages. Pick the best example of each and throw it in.
Now, see, I feel like I'm taking all the questions here.
No, I'm enjoying it. But I am curious. You're saying, you have your pinups and you have your sequential. Now, I know how that works as far as a penciler is concerned. So what kind of differences would you do as far as inks on pinup versus a sequential?
Well, pinups, you're not working with a whole bunch of different backgrounds and depths and stuff like that. Whereas where you get into sequential art, you're going to have close-ups, far away, buildings, trees. You get a good idea of different types of line weights for different panels.
Okay. Yeah.
And what is that like? Because there are some people who kind of take to sequential art, but then there are some people who it's really a kind of a journey for them to develop that flow, I guess, with the art. I'm not an artist, so my question might sound like, oh, you're an idiot, but I am kind of curious because I do love to sketch. I would never call myself an artist, but the idea of doing sequential frightens the hell out of me. I don't know that I would try it.
I'm not a penciler, so that's why.
Yeah.
But now that I'm scripting Divinity, I have to think like a penciler. And the best thing I can think of, and trust me, I'm very new at this. I'm scripting a 6-page Christmas special right now. And that's one of the reasons why when I was writing Divinity, I asked somebody else to script it, somebody who's very good at it, R.A. Jones, because I'm completely new at that game. But for the 6-page Christmas special, I'm scripting it myself, and then I'll take it to R.A. and tell him to fix it. But you have to think about it in cinematic terms. So I'm a huge action film fan and fantasy film like The Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. So when I'm picturing panels, I'm always thinking, how would I do this or look at it if it was a movie? And that's kind of how I see my panels. And I don't know if I'm doing it right or wrong. I guess I'll find out.
Well, we're talking about Divinity. Tell us how you came up with Divinity. It's a really interesting story. I've heard it before, but I'd love you to share that.
It's a bit of a sad story, actually. And it started about 3 years ago. 3 years ago in April, my brother was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic cancer. And my sister and I, we vowed that we would do anything to heal him. I mean, we had him on juicing and probiotics and hemp oil. I mean, we were frantic. And the sheer desperation to save him, I would have done almost anything. I was that desperate, you know. And about a month after he was diagnosed, I had this dream. And I dreamed of this little girl who could heal with a touch. And she became my protagonist. And my sheer desperation, my willingness to do anything, no matter what it took, kind of manifested in my antagonist, the bad guys who wanted to take advantage of her and her skills. And it was really came together fully fleshed in this dream. And I woke up this next morning and I wrote it down and I said, I got to do this. And I pondered it for, I don't know, a few months. And then I took it to roll. And then I said, I've got this idea. It just won't leave me alone, about this little girl who has this healing ability. And can you imagine what that would be like? Can you imagine being able to heal? And would you tell the world, would you consider it to be a curse or a blessing? What would happen if the world would find out about this? You wouldn't be able to step out your front door.
Right. Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to go anywhere. And there would be people after you, black sites and drug lords and mafia people and every rich guy on the planet, you know, that would want to get their hands on you, and government think tanks and religious fanatics. It's just the end. It's endless, the possibilities. And so her brother, their parents are killed mysteriously in the first issue. And her brother, Zach, comes back from the Marines to take care of her, gets a hardship discharge. And he doesn't know anything about this ability. She developed it after a near-death experience. But he becomes suspicious about their deaths and decides to investigate it, and everything falls apart there. And he finds out there's bad guys after him and they go on the run. And issue 2 deals with that, going on the run. And there was quite a gap between issue 1 and 2. There was a year's gap because real life, my brother didn't get healed, and I spent the last few months of his life caring for him. And he died in last December. So he was my muse, and he knew it. I told him about, you know, the whole thing. He thought that was pretty darn cool that he was the idea behind this comic book. So that was my gift to him.
Yeah.
That is heartbreaking and a beautiful story. Having lost my father, you know, to cancer also. Fuck cancer. Oh,
I have a necklace. I'm not wearing it right now. Right now I'm wearing his ashes, but it's beaded in Morse code. And my mom goes, "Oh, that's a beautiful necklace. What is it?" I says, "It's Morse code." She goes, "Oh, really? What's it say?" I says, "It says fuck cancer, Barbara Jean."
I love it. It's true. I lost too many people. But, you know, to be inspired by that, and to be on book 2 right now, and yes, life happens and stuff like that, but it sounds so epic. How far do you think that Divinity can go?
Well, it's got an unlimited potential of stories. That's just it. I would like to see it after the first 4 issues that we're going to do. I'd like to see it become so popular that it keeps going. I wouldn't mind Hollywood picking it up either, but you know.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge there.
Yeah.
So then with that, how do you balance the stuff that you want to do, your passion projects, with work projects, with life stuff? How do you find balance in your day?
For one thing, I'm retired from my muggle job, but that doesn't seem to have slowed my life down any. In fact, I need a retirement from my retirement.
I feel that 100%.
Now all of a sudden that well, COVID happened right after we retired, so that was good. And we were kind of isolated for a whole year. And then part of that year I was taking care of my brother. But then as soon as the isolation ended, it was, can you watch the kids? We've lost our babysitter due to COVID. Can you watch the kids 4 days a week? Oh, okay. Let me see. I've got 4 projects in the fire. Sure. So we're babysitting the grandkids, and I'm working on my art projects. But during the year of COVID, it was very, very nice because I was retired and I was able to put a lot of effort in that. And I also work on other projects for Silverline. I'm inking Cat and Mouse, and I'm coloring Sirens, another book. So and doing the books. So that keeps me busy. I'm definitely not the sitting home and knitting type of grandma.
And this is your first time coloring. I know you said you color in Sirens and you color Divinity. Was that your first time coloring? Or I know you said you've painted before, but okay. It looks great though. I've been privileged to see some of it, so I'm excited for it.
Well, the thing was, I had never done digital art in my life. I was like, it's all old school, if it isn't, with a brush and and ink, that I'm not doing it. I changed my tune pretty fast on that. I managed 2 years ago. I got a hold of an iPad and the Procreate app, and I was gone. I mean, it's like, why did I waste all my life? I still do stuff old school, but I have found that digitally I can go about twice as fast.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Less mess too.
Less mess. You're definitely less mess. And I'd always wanted to try my hand at coloring, and I'd done it like once before, way back. I mean, back when it was still done on treated board, and you laid an acetate over the top, and then you put it under a sun lamp, and then when you pulled the acetate off, it left the blue lines underneath. And then you hand colored it with Doc Martens inks. I did one of those. That was a lot of work.
It sounds like it, yeah.
And nowadays you can just, I don't like that.
Layer. Layer.
That layer. Right. I'm really enjoying it. It feels like between teaching myself to script and teaching myself to color, I'm just opening up an entirely new world for myself and really pushing the envelope on my skills. I don't think I'll ever learn a pencil, but.
Do you ever get frustrated? Because it sounds very similar for me. I'm always on a learning curve. So I'm always feeling a little uncomfortable because there's always so much to learn, and I kind of joke, I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. There's always something to learn. Do you get frustrated by that? Sometimes you're like, come on, brain, why?
Oh, hell yes. I have what they call imposter syndrome, which is really big in the artist community, which you feel like you're an imposter, and sooner or later you're going to get caught out, and they're going to realize you're just faking it all.
Oh yeah. I'm winging it. You understand? Good.
The truth is going to come out one of these days that for 30 plus years, she's just been faking it. So, and I still, to this day, I'm doing that. Even after all these years, I have that. It's a lot of self-doubt, but self-doubt pushes you to prove, at least it should push you to prove yourself. If not to anybody else, then just to yourself. And if you ever come to the point where you think you've learned it all, it's time to get out of the game.
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%.
I wouldn't want to be at that point. I definitely
Yeah.
wouldn't be at that point.
I mean, that to me just feels like, all right, there's nothing left. I might as well just cock up my toes and call it a day or a life. It's just, there's always something out there to keep things interesting.
The only drawback to that is it's a double whammy for me now. It used to be every time I read a comic book, I get my pull list from the comic shop and I read it, and then I go back and I'd study all the inking. And I'd break it all, I'd analyze it, and it takes some of the enjoyment out of reading comics because you are analyzing every single page. Now I'm analyzing the inking and the coloring, so I'm spending twice as long just picking apart every page. Going, oh, I wonder how they did that. How did they get that effect?
So I do want to pick your brain. Like, whose comic books are you looking at for inspiration and ideas?
Oh gosh. Right. My pull list right now is the Avengers and Iron Man and ElfQuest. And
of course.
Yeah. A lot of times I'll just go online and I'll surf the web and I'll pull out comic pages that I love and stick them in a folder on my Procreate app.
I like Pinterest. Pinterest, it's all sorts of stuff from Pinterest. Just pull
exactly. So it's random pages here and there. Laura Martin's stuff is just, oh my God, it's so gorgeous. She's like the epitome of the coloring world. I pull some of her stuff. I also like to do mood boards. So that's a coloring technique where if I have a series of panels or pages that are taking place in the same place and I want to set a mood for it, I'll find one piece of artwork that is going to set the whole mood for that, and I will use that piece of artwork for color references. And so all of the pages will be using that color scale. And the great thing about Procreate is you can drag that JPEG of that artwork and into your color palette, and it will generate a color palette of all the colors on that page.
Oh wow, that is neat.
That is really neat.
That is neat.
So because I've seen mood boards before, I've had mood boards, just kind of like my vision quest of where I want to go, whether it's vacation or inspiration for writing, whether it's, even for anatomy or a pose and things like that. So, but I never thought of it for a color palette. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, and they can come from anywhere. It can come from a photo. It can come from a painting that you see. Maybe if I wanted something to look really throwback, like I did in Sirens, I did a flashback scene where the main villainess was remembering she's been alive for hundreds of years, and she was remembering back in the Civil War era, and I wanted it to be all sepia tones. Yeah. So I went and I searched out all these photographs online that were actual vintage sepia tone photographs, and I downloaded them and created a mood board with them. So it doesn't have to be other comic book pages. It could be any type of artwork, a Rembrandt, or anything like that, anything that catches your eye and makes you feel something like, oh, wow, the ambiance on this piece is amazing. I got to save it.
Right. Yeah, there's a Facebook page that does that with movies. And they'll take like a scene from a movie and they'll pull all the colors out and they'll have a strip of what each color that's in it. It's like, oh, I got to save this page. So that's really neat. Yeah, colors for me it's a foreign language. I've tried. It's rough. It's hard. I put it that way. So I commend you very much so.
Well, I have a lot to learn yet. I would love to be able to break out my colors in definitive areas. Because that's a really popular style, but I haven't yet to learn how to do that and make it look good. So all my stuff looks airbrushed in the old 80s, 90s style. That's the way I do it.
So now I know, when I said that I was going to have Barbara Kaaalberg on the show, and people are like, "Oh, she's been in the business for so long." I mean, you're really up there. Do you fangirl about anybody out there?
Oh yeah, everybody but me.
Oh no!
I used to run around back in the day. I used to run around with a pretty amazing crowd of people. And one of my best friends was Bernie Wrightson, and I really, really miss him. And I have a little story about him. We were really good friends. We had kids the same ages. In fact, my daughter dated his son for 5 minutes. And when I got my first animation piece, broken into animation. It ended up being my only animation piece, but so I called him. I said, I can't believe this. I'm gonna be working on Angry Beavers for Nickelodeon. He goes, congratulations, that is so awesome. And a few days later, this package shows up in the mail. I'm like, okay, what's this? And I opened it up, and only Bernie Wrightson would send you a congratulatory beaver skull.
Oh,
well,
my
that's
gosh.
awesome. Yes.
Oh my goodness. And of course it's got an honorary position on your desk, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So that was my congratulatory gift from him.
Mhm.
It's just stories like that.
You also have a really interesting, and it's not exactly a happy story, but it's kind of cool about Mobius.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I love. Yeah, tell us about that. That was pretty neat.
1 year at San Diego, my room got broken into. I was staying at the U.S. Grant. That was my first mistake. I was staying at the U.S. Grant, and my room got broken into, and everything was stolen. My Walkman. Oh my God, my Walkman.
The Walkman. We're not aging ourselves.
I know. But my money, and in order to get to my money, they had to go through my underwear. So that was kind of creepy. But the next morning, I told Maggie Thompson, she's from Wisconsin here along with me, and a good friend. And she says, come on, I'll feed you breakfast, because I was broke. So she fed me breakfast, and then she put out the word that I had been ripped off and I was basically penniless, except for my plane ticket home. And I never had to buy a meal for the rest of the con. And Mobius did a sketch of my face. He did a portrait of me and gave it to me for free. And then I gave him a kiss on the cheek because he felt sorry for me. But I mean, it was just like, it was so wonderful in that respect. What could have been a really bummer experience turned into something completely different because everybody stepped up. Marvel took me out for a meal. DC took me out for a meal. It just, everybody was wanting to feed me and make sure that I had everything that I needed. So it was really heartwarming.
And that's kind of when you actually see comics as a community at that point in time, when everybody's kind of chipping in and taking care of everyone.
Yeah.
But it's also an interesting story how you found your penciler for Divinity.
Oh,
talk about fangirling and stuff.
Yes. So once I got Divinity rolling and got the script going, Roland says, well, now you have to go out and find your penciler. I'm like, me? I thought that's what you did. You're like,
don't you know a whole bunch of them? What are you doing?
It's like, all right, yeah, but I got to find somebody who's going to, work for free up front and get paid on the back end. And not a lot of my friends, they're too up there to do that. So they all have big names. So they're not going to work for me for free. So I started plowing through DeviantArt, which is, oh my God, it's like going down a rabbit hole. Once you get started in there, it's you will come back out hours later and say, what was I doing? And about that time, I got a private message on Facebook. I'd friended this guy a couple of weeks earlier, and it was a gentleman from Chihuahua, Mexico. and he said, "Hi, I'm a huge fan of yours. It's my dream to someday work with you." I'm like, "Well, that's cool. I get a lot of that, you know." But I clicked over to his Facebook page, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, "Oh, holy shit!" So I messaged him back. I said, "How about right now?" And I told him, you know, "Look, I'm not going to be able to pay you up front," but he's like, "I don't care. I don't care." So his pencils were just amazing. And he did Divinity for me, issues 1 and 2, and his career just took off. So now he's really, really booked up, and I'm going to have to be patient for his pencils on number 3, but it's worth the wait because he's just so good. So that's Alex Sarabia, and he's just a sweetheart. And I absolutely love his pencils. They're kind of a throwback to the real clean lines, very non-image look. Not that I don't like the look. I've done a lot of the image look, but I really am partial to really clean lines. And that's what his is.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you next, because you know you've seen these kind of progressions, and you were around when the image stuff happened, and they had that. I've heard you refer to the image as a scritchy, scratchy.
The scritchy, scratchy, yeah.
What as an inker, what did you prefer to ink? Because I can imagine the scritchy, scratchy kind of was a lot.
I've done everything under the sun. I've done it. I've done stuff that, well, I've worked on Carmine Infantino, which is a challenge because he never used a ruler in his life. I know he just eyeballed everything. And his pencils were very loose. All the way up to Ethan Van Sciver, who the detail that he had on Impulse, on those Impulse pages back then, was just insane. So I've worked on everything in between. Howard Porter's pencils were just very, very classical and with a real film noir look to them, and I love that. And then I've worked on John Statama, who's also super, super detail oriented. One of the She-Hulk pieces that I did for Marvel, the editor at the time, I think it was Bobby Chase, I'm not sure. She says, "Everything looks great except her hair. Can you give her Byrne hair?" You know, John Byrne. I'm like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And it did. It came out awesome. The hair, I thought. So the editor will say sometimes, you know, there's not a lot I want changed on this, but then there's other times he'll say, there's going to have to be some fixing here and there, or can you make this more image style? All right, I'll break out the pens. You know, so it pays to be versatile. And when I was working full time in comics between 89 and 2000, 2001 maybe, that before the big bust, implosion, you know, and then it went down to part-time. But during the years that I worked full-time, I did 2 issues a month, plus covers and trading cards. And I was a workhorse. I never missed a deadline in 12 years. And that was good in one respect, because editors knew that I was a workhorse, that if they gave it to me, I would turn it around. In the other respect, it was hard. I couldn't do it now. I was young and ambitious and very hungry back then. Now I'm in my 60s. I'm like, no.
So you put in the work. Yeah. That was just time to enjoy the fruits.
Yeah. I don't need, I don't need it for the money now. I do it for the enjoyment. You know, I have my retirement.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, since I've, because it's kind of like a refound love. It's kind of putting all of my creative capability into one spot. And I'm going, where have you been all my life? But I feel like I haven't really worked this hard in a long time. I'm like, whoa, what am I doing? You know, I should be kind of relaxing, and I'm not. And I love it. I love the process.
Yeah. If you're an artist, you're like a shark. If you stop, you die. You know, you got to keep swimming. And I found that to be very, very true. You don't want to become stagnant. And then it keeps you young. It keeps you alive.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, how has your style changed over the years?
A little bit looser.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I'm not quite as anal as I used to be. I was such a perfectionist. And the thing was, it was all physical artwork, and I hated whiteout. So you would hardly find any at all. Some pages never, no whiteout at all on my pages. So every line I placed was perfectly placed.
Mhm.
I also had perfect control. As I aged, I found that control wasn't quite as much as it used to be. And I started looking at other inkers too that made it look so effortless and organic. And especially like Bill Reinhold, his stuff, he just looks like he just went, and it's perfect, you know?
Mhm.
And I told myself, you just got to loosen up a bit. Don't be so anal about it, because what you're doing is you're taking the enjoyment out of it, and it's frustrating you because it's not perfect. And while I still find myself being very precise in my lines, if one of my lines wobbles a bit, I'm okay. So it wobbled. I just can't. I can't be upset over one line now. When I used to be, every single line had to be exactly perfect.
Mhm.
So I've relaxed a little bit. I think that age has a lot to do with that.
It's kind of funny because I was watching a live draw. Somebody was inking their work, and they were using these brush markers. And I go, what happens if all of a sudden you kind of have this hand spasm? It's like, what do you do? What do you do?
Make it work.
That's exactly what he said.
You make it work.
So, I mean,
You cry.
I cried.
In digital inking, you just erase it and go redo it.
Yeah, undo.
That's
Yeah, that's easy with the digital, but when it's like pen on paper, it's like, oh crap. Well, that'll be a little flower or something.
yeah.
Happy accidents. That's
Right.
And I'm not afraid to admit it, because of age, my hands aren't quite as steady as they used to be. So doing stuff physically takes me about 3 to 4 times as long as it does digitally, because you can just set your streamline on your lines on Procreate, and they're just as smooth as can be, and if you don't like it, just back up and redo it. So digital inking has really sped me up. It's been a blessing as I've aged, because I've been able to actually increase my speed digitally inking, whereas in physical inking, I've actually slowed down because I don't have the hand-eye coordination that I used to. I'm like, oh, what is that? My eyes are not as good as they used to be either.
But then in digital, you got Zoom. So that's,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just zoom it up.
That's awesome. Now, we blew past our 30-minute mark, and we're getting close to the 45-minute mark. So we're not going to keep you for very much longer, Barbara.
Okay.
So where can people find you? Where can they connect with you, see your works, and buy your stuff?
Well, buy my stuff. You can buy my stuff through Silverline, and that'll take you to a link to Indie Planet to buy my books through Silverline. Other than that, my old DC and Marvel stuff, I'm sure you can find it in 25-cent bins. And I've got, I don't know, over 200 books out there, so scrounge around and find them. Online, if you Google my name, Barb or Barbara Kaelberg, I'm the only Barbara Kaelberg on the internet. So I'm like not exactly hard to find, and it'll pop up with something like 12,000 pages. And you'll find me on DeviantArt. You can see some of my older stuff, some of my newer stuff, some befores and afters. That's basically my online resume. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all under Barbara Kaelberg. So once again, it's not hard to find me.
Now, with the world kind of slowly opening up, are you going to be on the con circuit?
I hope so. You know, when it closed down, I had 2 conventions a month scheduled for the entire year of 2020, and I was being sponsored by Wizard World too at the time, and all of that fell apart. And I've got all my convention gear behind those curtains that you see there, those drapes. So I'm hoping to drag it all back out again and hit the con circuit, but I think I probably won't schedule myself quite as heavily as I did in 2020, which never happened anyway. But I was scheduled all over the country twice a month, and that's a lot. I have too much to do here at home to do that twice a month. But I definitely want to do some shows. I'll probably start out doing the local shows because they are always eager to get me going. And then as things open up some more, hubby and I are both fully vaccinated, but we're still a little leery. As things open up a bit more, we'll still travel farther abroad.
Bring the Germex. What's a Germex?
Yes.
The con crud, I hear, is a real thing. I don't know, because I'm kind of like OCD with washing my hands and bringing the wipes anyway. So knock wood, I haven't really had an issue. C, do you have any final questions before we
this is Silverline 3.0, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how and so you've kind of been there with him on this one since the beginning. Well, maybe I'm not even sure. Maybe from the beginning of Silverline.
No, from 3.0. Silverline 3.0 wasn't even started yet when we were together.
Okay.
We started it after we did the first cat and mouse issue. And then we said, let's do this as a company. Yeah, it's 3.0. So yeah, I've been on it before the ground floor.
Okay.
It was one of the original. It was Dean Zachary, myself, and Roland were the beginning of Silverline.
Yeah. So, for books like Tiny and stuff that he had, was that initially Silverline, or were those just kind of books that he'd put out?
Tiny was before Silverline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not too clear. I know I hear the stories, so I don't have all of the info, but I know that you've been there especially since the beginning of 3.0. So
yeah. It started out as we just wanted to get cat and mouse up and running again, and it kind of exploded from there. Mm-hmm. And it's got a good rep, so the company has a good reputation, and that's very important. It's got quality products, and if you're going to get one of the books, that it's already done before we even hit Kickstarter, so you don't have to worry about waiting a year for it. And I understand that, especially with COVID. I've been waiting so long for oh gosh, I can't remember the name of it now. I've been waiting.
I have Kickstarters.
It's been so long.
I know. When they show up, it's like, oh yeah, I backed that. I forgot.
Dreadstar. I have been waiting for over a year for Dreadstar, and it's just been one thing and another. COVID shut down their printer and blah blah. And I understand that, but that's a long time to wait for a book that you've already purchased. So fortunately, we don't have to worry about that because we're done in advance.
And so Divinity #2 is going to be kickstarting very soon.
On the 13th.
On the 13th. Is #1 going to be available through that Kickstarter? Excellent. Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Yeah.
And
so
yeah.
But also but if you it is on Indie Planet though right now. If you wanted to get if you can't wait and you want to get a hold of it, it's also on Indie Planet. So
it'll be a double Kickstarter because we have so many books in the pipeline that we can't do enough Kickstarters.
Right.
So we always run 2 books at a time. So it'll be Steam Patriots, which is a steampunk, and I'm really looking forward to that because I love steampunk, and my book Divinity. So I think it's going to be a really great Kickstarter.
That's awesome. Now, as we close up here with Geek Insider, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Make sure that you hit the share button. Go over to Kickstarter, look for Silverline, and hit the notify me on launch button. Barbara, We usually have one last question we ask all of our guests.
So,
are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. If you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would that be?
Take more anatomy classes.
That's the artist talking, folks.
Yes. As for everything else, I don't think I'd change a thing. I've been happily married for 40 years. I have 2 amazing children. I have 2 great grandchildren. My life's been pretty good. I mean, there's always going to be ups and downs that's going to be bummers. But for the most part, I focus my regrets on things I didn't do in my art career.
And C, do you want to take us out? I'll put you on the spot.
You want me to take us out?
I'll do it. Here we
What
go.
do you mean? Oh, there. See, I don't know. You gotta teach me. I don't know this one.
Yeah, I will learn you my ways. Everybody, thank you for tuning in to Geek Speak. This is Comics Talk. We had Barbara Kaaalberg, writer, artist, inker. You can find her over at Silverline. Take a look at their Kickstarter launching May 13th. Give them some love. Follow her on social media. And like I always say, follow her everywhere. Just don't go peeking in her windows. That's weird. All right, you guys, geek out. Have a great night. Thank you for tuning in. At Geek Insider, we foster relationships with those in the geek sphere so we can give our audience the insider view of entertainment, tech, and more.